Hello, everyone. Good morning, and I hope life is swell. Thanks for joining our Ask the Expert webinar today. We're recording this session, and we'll submit a link to the recording over the next few days. All right. Just to let you know, our next webinar is scheduled for September 2nd at 11 a.m. Central Standard Time. This webinar is designed to teach you the SDLC process management with Atlassian tools. As you have questions, please be sure to provide them via questions utility in the GoToWebinar control panel. We'll queue them up and answer them towards the end of this session. On the webinar today from Percipio Consulting, we have Brian Nye, Senior Solutions Architect, and he will be presenting today's webinar. My name is Shane Cormier, and I'm a Business Development Manager here for Percipio Consulting, and I'll be serving as your moderator. We've been Atlassian Expert Partners for over 6 years now and are one of 5 Platinum Enterprise Experts in the country. Over 99% of our products are Atlassian related. We have hundreds of clients across the US ranging in size from 20-person companies to Fortune 20 enterprises spanning many different industries. We help our clients with process-centric technology solutions that facilitate traditional business process management, IT service management based on ITIL, and software development lifecycles. In the SDLC space, we're helping clients transition from traditional waterfall to agile. Whatever widgets you produce, we help improve in quality and throughput on the lowest cost. We support our clients in all facets of the Atlassian product suite and build methodologies and solutions across the entire product line. Solution architecting implementations, licensing, upgrades, and maintenance, solutions, managed services, hosting, add-on development, and training are just some of the things that we produce. So now what I'm going to do is go ahead and pass on over to Brian Nye. Are you there, sir?
I'm here. Thanks, Shane. Good morning again. My name is Brian Nye. I am a Senior Solutions Architect with Percipio Consulting. I am a certified Scrum Master as well as a SAFe Program Consultant. All right, for today's webinar, it's all about getting you a chance to ask questions to me, your Confluence expert for the day. I've had a lot of experience helping clients design and implement Confluence spaces, as well as help them create and deliver their best possible products. So please feel free to submit your questions by using the GoToWebinar's question dialog box. If you've taken time to email your questions, we'll be able to answer those too. The purpose behind this webinar is to really allow you to see your questions answered live. So please don't be shy, be an active participant. If for some reason you missed out on getting one of your questions answered, please feel free to contact us at sales@percipio.com. So with that, let's go ahead and start answering some of those Confluence questions. And I'm going to start off by just answering one of the questions that I think that I receive the most as a Senior Solutions Architect, which is, why should I use Confluence? And really just Confluence is one of the products that it's the birthplace and the burial of ideas, is what I always say. It's where you really can flush out an idea before you even commit anything into JIRA, which I think is one of the most important things that people often forget. They want to use JIRA for everything because JIRA is fantastic, and I think a lot of you who are using JIRA understand that, but they really want to start using JIRA to do everything from putting in all the requirements details and then having that JIRA for collaboration. And JIRA can absolutely do collaboration and everything else, but really Confluence is solid at that collaboration piece and really is meant to help your teams do the planning piece that Agile people say, oh, Agile doesn't plan. Well, I think we all know that you have to have some planning involved. And Confluence really allows you to do that planning piece that you really can't do in JIRA really well up front. It allows you to go in there and flush out those ideas and start to build out, what is this product going to look like? What do we need to have these stories do? And Confluence is great for that. It gets your teams in there, allows you to collaborate, really flush that idea through. And then as you then start moving those pieces of information into JIRA, what you're going to be able to do is utilize Confluence then to start that reporting mechanism. And I will say this, coming from more of a project management standpoint in previous lives, JIRA can be intimidating for those who don't understand JIRA and don't know how to use it. So by just saying, well, I've built out this fantastic dashboard, Mr. Project Manager, just go there and you can see where all the epics are and the stories that are related to it. They're all right there. Utilize Confluence to put it in a medium that they're most used to. If I were to ask the audience, how many times have you been asked to, generate a report by pulling issues out from JIRA, capturing screenshots, having to put some text in a PowerPoint and then send that information out to one of your project managers? Probably plenty of you said, I've done that plenty of times. Utilizing Confluence to have that space, because Confluence gives that documentation feeling that we're used to, we can utilize those JIRA reports and JIRA gadgets to start putting information into a page with text wrapped around it, so that way you can really understand it. And then finally, I would say, for teams considering, why should I use Confluence, is the fact that you can close the loop by utilizing Confluence to put in your retrospectives for your team. So from a team point of view, I can utilize it to really help improve my team by going in and looking at our sprints, documenting what it looks like to make those performance improvements that we want to do at a team level, outside of the products that we're developing, but just from the team itself, and say, here's the plans that we're going to do to really make those improvements to help, get our products out there quicker, really take on that lean methodology that Agile so promotes, to really, enhance the way our team works and have those documented plans. So I would say, that's the biggest question that I have. And I know that we've got some questions coming in. So Shane, do you want to go ahead and start firing off some questions for me?
Yeah, thanks, Brian. So we received a lot of questions in prior to the GoToMeeting today. I've kind of grouped them up a little bit. So I'll start off with a permissions question. How do I control access to spaces?
Sure. So one of the questions one of the ways that you can control access to spaces, I think, really largely relies on using the global permissions first. By navigating up into your general configuration and going into your global space permissions, let me log in here. So start with your global permissions and figure out, who is able to, actually start creating spaces or creating personal spaces. And one of the key things that I want to point out is this anonymous access, which can allow, if you're not hosted behind a firewall, allow access to others who may not have a Confluence login, so that way they can gain access to your space. And then from a space permission view, you can then utilize anonymous access to present documentation. This is great if you have a product that you want to release documentation towards, just like Atlassian does. They have their documentation that we utilize heavily to go and find out, what's the newest, latest, greatest piece of Confluence or JIRA, all their documentations on how-to articles, all done in Confluence. It allows anonymous access, so I don't have to have an Atlassian login to go and see the documentation. It's just anonymous viewing. So I would say global permissions, start there with the anonymous access piece. And then going into the actual space permissions themselves and taking a look at, who's able to do what. This will allow you to make sure that you're getting the right pages, or you're giving the right access to for what you want people to do, which I think is important to make sure that you're keeping your Confluence spaces clean and consistent. And then from there, you can also restrict further by utilizing page restrictions. So if I was just to go real quick into, let's see here. Let's go into a page. If I wanted to restrict editing for a page while I'm in it, I could restrict down page editing, or either editing or viewing. And once I restrict viewing on a particular page, especially if I want to leave a space open for general consumption by a particular group or groups, but there is a special section that I don't want necessarily to give access to everybody, I could certainly restrict the viewing of that page. And then any children pages based off of it would be able to also inherit that restriction as far as viewing is concerned.
All right, thanks, Brian. Good stuff there. You did a good job with the permissions piece, but I have another question. When do I make a new space?
Sure. So making new spaces in Confluence, again, you have to have that permission in order to create a new space. So if you have that space, that's a good question as far as when do I go ahead and create that new space. And really, I think it's important to think about, who do I want to access that space? Typically, when you're developing a JIRA project and have those different categories in it, I always like to have one Confluence space that reflects a particular project. So that way, as I make those requirements and start documenting those pieces that we talked about at the beginning, you can really find it quickly and easily because I know that this JIRA space belongs to this, or this JIRA project belongs to this Confluence space. So keeping your Confluence world small, I think, is important. So that way you don't have to go through and try to figure out where my information is. And I think that that's extremely important, is the fact that people get lost in Confluence because they don't take the time to think through the structure piece. So making sure that you keep your Confluence space equivalent to something that is important to an individual, that they would quickly know, okay, if I want to go this or want information about this particular piece of information, I go to this space so that way I can find it. And then, like I said, as far as from permission standpoint, then you can really start locking down that space to making sure that it's just the right people have access to it that would need to have access to that content.
Good stuff, thanks. Next question is revolving around plugins. What are some plugins that I should know about with Confluence?
Sure, so some of the plugins that I think that are important to Confluence or people should know about, I've got a couple. Bricket Theme Press, I think, is a great add-on that people should utilize, especially if they want to give that look and feel piece. I'm just going to log into a website that hopefully you all know, which is Percipio.com. Percipio.com is essentially, it is Confluence. It is a space within Confluence that we have Theme Press overlay to make it look and act like a website. So when you're looking at Percipio.com, this is Bricket's Theme Press presenting that information out to the user. We could have just left it as a regular Confluence space, but regular Confluence can seem kind of boring. And when you're trying to put together a website that you want people to go to, putting a little look and feel that feels friendly and warm and inviting, that's what we kind of did with here to get people to come in and look at us. But same thing can happen when you're looking at your web pages within if you want to make an intranet for your company, or just to try to get people that may not want to have that utilitarian feel, is one of the words that one of the past clients felt that Confluence was pretty rigid and didn't have that warm, inviting feeling for those individuals that are more touchy-feely. So utilizing a plugin like ThemePress to give that overlay of something warm and inviting that I can go in, click, and understand that, oh, okay, if I click here, it's going to take me to this. But again, it's built on top of Confluence. So I think that plugin is for those individuals looking to have something to give more of a tactile feel, that nice feel to it. This is a good one. Another one, Confluence Questions. Atlassian Answers is based off of Confluence Questions. I happen to love Confluence Questions. I think it's a great way to get knowledge out there to others who may not want to ask a formalized, or I want to ask a question and I don't necessarily need it to come from one particular source. There are so many people, especially like in our company, that have the knowledge there that I could ask a general question that maybe other people want to know, and then have experts within your organization come back and answer those questions. Atlassian Answers, we use that pretty heavily day in and day out for those one-ish, two-ish questions that, not really sure, but it seems like someone else out there has asked the question. And we certainly do troll it for questions out there that we have the answer to, so that we can go ahead and supply those. So Confluence Questions, I think, is an excellent add-on plugin that people should look at. Another one for individuals who want to give pages more of a workflow type feel, Kamala Workflows is a great one. So that way you can actually build in those documents that need to have edits done by certain individuals. So that plugin is fantastic for giving that workflow feel to a document. I can build out that workflow to make sure that it goes through the appropriate approvals before I actually essentially publish it out to either that site or maybe if I want to push it out to another space for publishing, I can do it that way. Secure Content Macro is another one that we use quite heavily at Precipio, and I think is another great plugin for the fact that you can embed secured information within a page. So maybe it is just different pieces of content that I may not want everybody to have access to, particular groups. I can secure that information right there on the page. It's encrypted. So that way, if I need to access it and I have permission to, I can simply add in or type in the password that I used to log into Confluence, and then I would have that information popped up. Another plugin that I can think of would be like an archiving plugin. There are several different ones out on the marketplace, but essentially Confluence spaces can get rather large and information can get kind of lost. So these archiving plugins typically go out, look for pages that have been underutilized lately, so that way you can go through some sort of archiving process to, maybe retain the data, but not have it cluttering up a particular space.
Thanks, Brian. Good stuff on that. Next question I have is really revolving around, I guess, the structure of Confluence. They've been using it a while, and they're curious, what's the best way to structure this? Brian, are you there, sir?
Sorry, I muted myself. Yes, sorry. So structure is one of the ways that I think is important to really focus on when you're first creating your Confluence space. That structure needs to be natural. The user needs to be able to find information with the fewest clicks. So making sure that you're going through and building out that structure first, thinking through how that mapping is going to look is extremely important. And it's a step that so many people don't utilize. Another thing is that you really want to make sure that you're doing is, as a space administrator or someone who is in charge, well, space administrator, making sure that people are kind of sticking to that structure. Being maybe space police is incorrect to use, but making sure that people are using the structure the way it was provided. And if you start seeing instances where structure is being broken, try to figure out why it is that people aren't sticking to the structure to make sure that it makes sense for the entirety or for people to use. So really making sure that it's natural, fewest clicks is the most important part when it comes to structure.
Thank you, Brian. Next question says, we use children on a regular basis. Why should we use a label rather than a child?
Sure. So labels are, let's put it this way. Rather than recreating pages over and over in a space, I can essentially utilize a label on a page, and then utilizing some of the macros that come within Confluence, I can then pull that information over into other spaces or find that information that's relevant across multiple spaces. So rather than trying to recreate pages and having multiple pages contain similar things, utilize those labels to bring content together. It's going to keep your Confluence space and spaces smaller, your instance of Confluence smaller, because you're not recreating the same thing over and over. And it's going to allow for more collaboration within the same area. It really becomes that single source of truth or single point of truth that so many people are looking for, and not having so many documents that's all over the place.
All right. Next question. How can I build structure quickly? And this ties into some of the best ways, but I think they want to know specifically, how do we get it done?
Sure. So when it comes to if I'm starting off with Confluence and I want to get some of that structure piece, utilizing those blueprints um, and templates that are within Confluence out of the box is a great way to build out structure. They come with some structural pieces as far as having indexing pages that are built automatically with those rollups, plus with the blueprints itself, you get shortcuts within the links, the spaces here, so that way I can see where things are relatively quickly. So utilizing the blueprints and templates can really be a great way to go ahead and get structure built in quickly without needing to go through and build out pages with all these fancy different macros that are available out of the box within Confluence. Atlassian has already done some of that work for you. So if I want to get up and running out of the box quickly, that's one of the ways to go.
All right. Next question. How do I
You broke up there, Shane.
Sorry about that. Let's try that once again. How do I change up the look and feel of Confluence?
Sure. So Confluence, you can do it in a couple different ways. I can control the look and feel of a space level or from a global level. But from the space tools bar, right here in look and feel, I can simply click in here. And this is where I can go through and maybe change up the theme, change up the color scheme, layout. I have PDF style sheets and whatnot that I can go in there and start creating a space that looks and feels more so the way that I brand out my the rest of my business. I could change up where this Confluence logo and put in a logo that's reflective of my company and the coloring and whatnot. Trying to again make it so that way the users can adapt to the site more quickly and easily. I think that adaptation piece is one of the things that people struggle with the most. So that look and feel, even though it may seem trivial, when people see things that they're familiar with, I think it's really important to increase that user adoption. If it looks completely foreign to me, I'm less likely to go in there and start exploring because I don't know if I'll break something. But if it's branded the way that I'm used to seeing some information and content, then I feel more encouraged to go in there and start doing that exploration piece. So again, a lot of times people are like, that's kind of a trivial point, but when you're coming from just the way people behave when it comes to technology and whatnot, I think it's important to ensure that you get that look and feel and you nail those points as well.
All right, thank you. I think we're kind of switching gears. Someone has a question about blueprints and templates. Is that how can I create my own?
Yep, you can certainly create your own blueprints and templates within Confluence, and it does require some custom development to do so, just because of the way you access the blueprints. My recommendation is that you can utilize the blueprints that are already in Confluence and modify those to what it is that you want to do. So if you have the, let's see here, global templates and blueprints. So if I'm looking at the requirements, product requirements blueprint itself, that's out of the box within Confluence, and I like it, but maybe some of the pieces of information aren't important to me. I can certainly go in and change up what that blueprint looks like. So maybe if I didn't want to do assumptions, I could go ahead and save this. And this is going to modify it across my instance of Confluence. So now that modified products requirement blueprint has changed. Don't worry, if you need to reset back to the default, you certainly can by just clicking on that hyperlink and it's going to reset back to the default blueprint. If you really want to learn how to create your own blueprints, there are tutorials out on Atlassian's documentation on how to do it. But again, it's more work than what typically a lot of people want to put into it. It requires some coding skills, so It's possible, but yeah, have fun.
I like it. All right, let's see. There's a question more for reporting. How can I get Confluence to report on JIRA issues for those who may not want to work in JIRA? It's a good question.
So I think we touched on a little bit with it from the first part, but when I talked about it. But you can certainly utilize the JIRA reports that's out of the box within Confluence. So, and it's pretty powerful blueprint that they've created. So I can simply just, with a few clicks, create a report that's out of JIRA, utilizing some of this information. Let's do demo here at the end. And it's going to go in and already pull some information out of JIRA and put it in here. And then from here, like I was saying, you can start adding text. So I can add and modify my page so that we can go ahead and get this information more presentable to that user. So that way they can still get the same pieces of information that's over in JIRA, but they utilize it in a format that's more that they're used to. These gadgets that you see here are simply the JIRA macro, coming in from the JIRA macro. So you can use these on any page. I could put in some sort of JIRA chart, and there's a couple different options when it comes to that macro. You just have to use some JQL or JIRA query language to go out and search for the types of JIRA pieces that we want and or the JIRA information that you want, so we can go ahead and get it pulled over into this particular report. But utilizing this information is a great way to get use the same information. It doesn't take much more work to pull that information over, and they get it in a format that they're used to.
Good stuff. Let's see. We have a question that just came in a little while ago. We have a large instance, about 10,000 plus users. It's grown mainly by word of mouth. We're trying to figure out now how to give our instance more structure and organization rather than just dozens of spaces. I don't know, any recommendations on that?
Sure. So I would say that one of the ways that you can look at it is there's nothing wrong with having the multiple spaces and organization and the structure, because Confluence is really meant to give it the user or allow teams to collaborate together. I would say that one of the recommendations that I would have is linking together to other spaces. So that way, maybe information that's contained across spaces, I can simply link the pages together. One of the things that we did with one of the clients is we built out almost like a landing directory space to where they could have different categories and link it over to the particular space of interest. So for example, if you had a space that was dealing with product pricing and sales, and maybe you had one that was more focused on marketing efforts, you could essentially create those links to those other spaces within the one space. So that way it's kind of like a launching point. And you can also do that with the system dashboard. Build out a dashboard to where it's mostly focused on where the content is stored with those different spaces, and then you can launch out into the space that's right for the person. Utilizing labels and search functionality would also be great. So that way you can get you know where the right information is, and you're not duplicating the effort. So that's what I would do. There's nothing wrong with having multiple spaces, especially if you want to try to control that access standpoint. If you want to narrow it, lock it down to maybe only, especially like HR type issues is one that keeps popping in my head. If I have some sort of space that's dedicated to HR type issues, I probably don't want everybody in it. So I'd probably want to create its own space for that. But just using that page tree structure as far as parent-child relationship is one way to, if you want to try to reduce spaces but get information segregated, focusing on that structure. Hopefully that kind of answers some of your question. What else we got,
Sure
Shane?
does. Let's see. Hopefully it does too. I have another one here. When I'm working on a change request, what should go in the Confluence and which?
I think you said what should go into Confluence and what should go in JIRA?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. If you're working on a change request, I think it's important that you update both pieces. So it depends on how, so it depends. It's one of these questions is a change request a different issue type that you already have within JIRA that you're going to be linking the issues together? Or is the change request something that somebody gives you and then you go in and modify the JIRA issue to reflect the change request? So it depends on how your business is formatted. So I would say this, if you're making a new change request, I would say that you would update the documentation within Confluence and then also make reference back to the change request that you have as its individual issue type. If you work in an environment where you don't necessarily create a new issue for the change request, but maybe you're just updating the information within JIRA itself, you can certainly just link back to the Confluence page and have that information in there. I always like to try to keep Confluence documentation up to date, just because you can then pull out information from Confluence and show what it is that final product, that final requirement actually looks like. So I think it's important to keep both areas up to date.
Perfect. We have another question on reporting. What sort of audit trails and controls are in place to monitor editing of content?
Sure. So there's a couple different things that you can do as far as auditing is concerned. One of those being, if I want to see how a page has changed, you can certainly use the page history, in which I can go then and compare two different versions of a page. So that way I can see what changes have happened as far as from an audit standpoint, which I think is really great. We've worked with several companies in the energy industry, and having the ability to show changes that have been made extremely important to them. So this type of information is critical for them to have that available. Another thing would be if you're using the Kamala Workflows add-on plugin. That allows you to create some sort of audit trail as far as who approved the document to be in its final state. Another thing you can do is if you have, let me go back here. If you have attachments on the page itself, don't forget that you can also see what the version is on attachments to a particular page. So if I were to update this image, and as long as the attachment was named the exact same, but and I resaved it to the page, it's going to show me that version history of even attachments. So I can go through, and if you're still going to use outside documents like Excel to do some sort of Excel type work, but you want to keep the information within Confluence, you certainly can do that. And then you can also keep the version history of far as how that Excel document has changed within Confluence, because as long as you don't change the name, it's going to keep those versions available within the Confluence page that you attach it to.
Awesome. I have a question here. It looks like about collaboration. They were curious, how do you suggest helping adoption with collaboration?
So we talked a little bit about look and feel as far as, trying to match that look and feel of what you're currently using, maybe from an intranet perspective or whatnot. I would also say that, utilizing those social features that, are inherent in both JIRA and Confluence and all the Atlassian products, so such as app mentions and notifications. All those pieces really help build out the community to try to help with adoption. So trying to get that, I shouldn't feel burdened when I use Confluence. So it's going to be a combination of structure, bringing in, from a social aspect, at mention, so that way I feel like I'm being asked a particular question. I feel like I'm embedded in within a team. I think really pulls in a team into using Confluence more. It can't be just a product that you install and say, well, go and use it, because what happens is people don't know how to use it. It's just too much. They're given a blank slate. It's like, go and build a building with no blueprint. I wouldn't know where to start. I would assume I would pour a foundation, but I could be absolutely wrong. You have to have some sort of structure and think through, like, okay, well, where would I want to go? And start to take your users through that journey through Confluence. And I think those are important pieces to keep in mind. You can't just hand them the product and say, go for it.
I agree. What are the best practices and or existing functionality in Confluence for version control?
So one of the things that we just showed you as far as version control is concerned would be the whole page history going through, and also for version control as far as attachments are concerned. Those are all work great. I would say another piece is that if you're trying to control who's able to do what within a version, you could also certainly utilize the editing restrictions within a page. So as I've created a particular page and I'm ready to publish it, essentially to say that no more changes have been done, I think it's also great to go ahead and restrict the viewing. So that way I can lock down a particular, or I'm sorry, not viewing, restrict the editing of a page. So that way maybe I only limit it to a few individuals that could actually go in and make changes. I think that's a great way to make sure that you control that version and what's within it. So
Good stuff. And I think kind of related to that, what are the best practices and existing functionality in Confluence for managing those projects?
So from a close this real quick. So for managing practices and existing functionality in Confluence, from a product requirement standpoint, would be still, I would say, utilizing your blueprints that you have set up, or templates. Going through and modifying them to make them look and feel the way that you would want them to feel for your organization is important. Atlassian spent a lot of time developing these blueprints inherently, so I say just utilize what they've given you and start making some modifications. And you can modify it at the global view and also the space one, or at the space level. So maybe if my group just works slightly different, I can modify that blueprint to make it look the way I want it to. That way I have repeatability when it comes to what my product requirements looks like. People aren't just given a blank page. They can go ahead and utilize that. If you also, I would say, utilizing the roadmap macro is also a good thing that you could use. So this is in the newer versions of Confluence. Oops, where am I at? Let's just come down here to this section. This looks pretty blank. That roadmap planner can help me also build out as far as when I would have different expected things to happen within a timeline. I could go ahead and start tying pages to that, so that way I can see visually, when I could when certain things should happen. So again, another planning piece that I think really helps with product requirements and utilizing some best practices. Making sure that once you've created the table or created issues within Confluence, utilizing the create from JIRA macro. Let's see here. I think maybe in this product requirements here, I've got this. Let's go into here. So if I had a table and wanted to go ahead and start creating some issues from it, I could simply go in, oops, not inline comment. I could start creating my issues straight from the information right here on the Confluence page. Once it's in a table format, Confluence is going to ask you, do you want to create all the issues from this particular table? So that's a great way to go ahead and embed JIRA right within a Confluence area. And then you would also be able to see the progress of those JIRA issues. So
all right, thanks, Brian. So just a reminder, guys, if we have about 15 minutes left, if you have any questions burning, go ahead and send them in to me, and I'll go ahead and volley them up to Brian. Brian, I have another one that just came in. We have toyed with the directory idea, but what about for very restricted spaces?
Yep, so just like JIRA, if I'm not able to see the issue, I can't get to it. So if you were to build out some sort of directory space, the link may still appear to be there, but if I can't, it wouldn't allow me to see the information that's in there. So if you were to restrict out the area, the link may still show, but you wouldn't necessarily be able to access the content that's within the space itself because it would be restricted.
All right, thanks. Let's see. Next question is about importing data. Is it possible to create pages using HTML in Confluence?
You can utilize HTML to create pages within Confluence, and you can paste the stuff in and it will show up. There may be some issues when it renders out. It doesn't usually render out correctly. And there's also the HTML macro that you could copy and paste your HTML content into that macro and have it displayed on the page. But since it's not actually done within the Confluence page itself, it's done within a macro, you may have some rendering things. There may also be some security risk involved, so you may want to think through if you actually want to do that type of functionality within there, but it is possible to do it.
All right, talking about macros, what are some good macros that we use on a daily basis?
Some macros that I use on a daily basis are definitely going to be the page properties and the page properties report macros, the sister macros, as I like to call them. So the page properties macro should be on this page right here. So yeah, what you're looking at up top here, oops, hit edit real quick on this. So this page properties macro essentially allows me to take these pieces of information and display them on another page, which I think is super handy. I can go ahead and put in, key pieces of information that I'd want to see from this page displayed on another page and put it in here. One of the things that I also like to do on some of these pages is add one that had some sort of summary. So I could put in like a little blurb as far as this is some information about what's found on this particular page. And then, let me save this. So on this roll-up page then, edit this slightly. I don't think summary came over. Actually, maybe it was there. Close this. There it is. So by putting that summary in here, this is the roll-up page of basically the information from the page property macro from the children pages that were below it. But I have that summary in here, so I can get a lot of information as far as what's going on with that page right from this roll-up page to make sure it is the type of information that I want. So, oh, yep, that looks like what I want. I can go ahead and click into the page, and then there you go. It's displayed. I can go in there, utilize the work. So this is one of the ways that you can utilize that page properties macro to quickly see what information is out there and start getting work done. I don't, as a user, have to go through and slog through a bunch of pages to try to figure out, is this the page that I actually want? It tells me there from that information, so I can quickly go to it. I also like the roadmap planner macro that I showed you just a second ago for the fact that I can start to do some planning that everybody says Agile is so terrible at doing. I can start planning out, what does my release look like? I can then attach pages to that particular macro. So as I start building out the, actually, let me just edit this page right here. Let's just throw it right down here. Looks like a great place for a road planner macro. So as I start making these bars, and I can link to a different page. So I could link it to, and if you start typing it, it's going to start suggesting, should start suggesting. There we go. Starts just suggesting pages that are already out there. So maybe this goes to this particular page. So as I map out, when this is going to take place, give me a length, I can change the start end date, all that other good stuff. Maybe I have some sort of demo going on. I want to put this marker here as a major placeholder. I hit insert. Now I've got that information here. Whoops, let me save the page. Of course, you can always label the bars differently. Sorry, I guess I should have done that as well. But I can essentially be linked right straight here to this page. So I can go ahead and start, take to this page, and then I can see what that requirement looks like, or I'm assuming that this would be a requirement, what that information is. So I think that's an excellent macro that Atlassian put into the latest version of Confluence. So if you haven't used it, I would suggest doing that. If you're still have project management managers that are still utilizing Office, Excel, and Word, there are plugins that you can certainly utilize that from macro level that you can gain access to those particular documents. Also with the latest version of Confluence, let me go back to the page that I was just at. Don't know who uses this demo, but they're going to be glad that I put all different types of stuff in here. Let me go ahead and edit this page real quick. Let's just say there's a document that I want. I've got this test document here. I can essentially drag and drop documents now right into my Confluence page. Move that around to where I want it actually. So that way I can get a little preview. And the Atlassian documentation will tell you exactly which types of documents you can do it with. But this way I can see in a little embedded image of the document itself. This also, then you can do the, let me save this real quick. So now I've got this document embedded in here. I can click to view the document. It'll generate a preview. And I can also use that inline commenting that they did. I can do it here on the document itself, which I think is fantastic. So maybe I want to put a comment here. Add more text. It doesn't get much better as far as collaboration is concerned than that right there. I can certainly use my app mentions and whatnot to get people to pull them in, focus on what's important within the document, and utilize it that way.
All right. Well, we have time for a couple more questions. You guys are sending some really good ones, making my job really easy today. I have another follow-up on that macro. How does one simply write custom macros? I've heard this a few times before. It's a good one.
Sure. So in the Confluence admin tab, you have a spot where you can actually write some custom macros. You're going to be using velocity templates with HTML, CSS, and Java scripting, but you can do it. I would say that they're basic macros that you're going to be able to create. So they won't be anything too terribly fancy. If you wanted to really create a macro that's going to do a lot of functionality, you're probably better to write a plugin for it rather than just use the plugin writer, which I usually have a hard time finding on the menu here, but I promise it's in here. User macros. There we go. So it's within here that you can create your own custom macro, essentially. What's next, Shane?
That's a popular one, by the way. Let's see. I like this one. What is the most unique use of Confluence you've seen to date? Good question.
We had a group that had SOX compliance and internal audits that they needed to put together. So they utilized Confluence to keep their internal audits in. They also house their standards and controls within the Confluence space. So it was very heavy with documentation, but it wasn't your traditional software development, which I think is nice. Yeah, so it's nice to see the Atlassian products being utilized in many different industries. It doesn't have to be just for software development, just because they are pretty universal as far as if you need to track an issue or I shouldn't say an issue, you need to track an item, track some sort of work progress, JIRA is great for it. If you need to have some place to create documentation, collaborate, store documentation, Confluence is excellent for that. So it's not just restricted to software development. It really can be applied in many different facets of work and business. So.
All right. I think we had a question a little similar to this earlier, but I don't think to this degree. I'm curious to see what you would have on this one, Brian. We've been using Confluence with a few teams for a while and are about to roll it out to our whole company, and they're given about 850 users. What should I do to prepare for it?
Sure. So if you're an existing Confluence person and if you already have an existing Confluence instance and you want to scale it up, first thing that you want to check is, how is your current performance within Confluence? And then try to, because Atlassian has documentation as far as scalability, things to look at certain mile markers, but it's very hard to set that as a baseline to say, yep, let's just go by these chart indicators, just because it depends on how heavily is Confluence being used. 850 Confluence users in one Confluence may look completely different than 850 users in a different context, just because people may create more pages and spaces in one project versus another. So I think it's important to really look at how you're currently utilizing your or what your current system needs are for your current set of users, and then try to predict what that based off of the load that you're currently placing on it for that increase in users. If that's 2 times the amount of users, that doesn't necessarily mean that you need 2 times the pieces of information or the hardware to go behind it, but it certainly is a way to kind of guesstimate as far as where we need to shift our scaling to. I would say that if you're going to be, doing that, certainly bringing in a company like Precipio Consulting would be recommended, just to kind of, toss around some ideas as far as, what does that look like? What type of hardware recommendations are there? Making sure that your current space of Confluence is up and running. Are you putting in best practices right now to make sure that scalability makes sense for you in the future?
I agree. All right, guys. Brian, cool if we do one more question?
Sure.
Great. Let's see. Is there a way to publish content in Confluence?
Yep. So if you're going to publish content in Confluence, utilizing the restriction as far as no more edits can be made on this particular page is a great way to do it. And I would also say when it comes to a publishing aspect, what you can do is I can create all the content maybe in my collaboration space. So have a space set up where I go in, make the edits and changes that I want to make. And then when I'm ready to actually, maybe I have an outward facing space for documentation purposes, then I can go ahead and put that finalized done copy within that space itself. So that way the page that's out there in facing the world is one that I know is clean, it's been thought through, and there's no more changes going to be done. So if you're going to be publishing out like that, I would make that suggestion. All right, Shane, I think that summarizes everything. So I'm going to toss it back over to you, okay?
Thank you. All right. Well, thanks, guys. Thanks for listening today. As you can read here, we offer client-centric solutions all around for JIRA and Confluence, as you can hear today, in the entire Atlassian product suite. Contest, just let us know if you have any training or implementation needs, anything optimization, any questions in general. We're really here to be able to walk through assessments, discoveries, just Q&A, tons of training. If you have any hosting needs, we're here for you. So just let us know if you have any questions about that. And again, as a reminder, our next webinar is scheduled for September 2nd at 11 a.m. Central Standard Time with Amanda Babb. She's also a Senior Solutions Architect. And outside of that, thank you guys, everyone, for joining us today. I hope you have a great day. Let us know if you have any questions. You'll have our contact information there, as you can see below. And have a wonderful day. Thank you so much. Thank you, Brian.